Interior design client revisions. When someone asks for a revision on a project, they are not the enemy. um, Something that's important to know on any interior design or architecture project is that there is a direct correlation between the complexity of a project and the amount of revisions that might be required. And this is something that a lot of designers don't realize because the more complex a project is, it is more likely that as the brief evolves and develops, it is more likely and it just is required as part of the design process to undertake revisions. But what is not normal, I suppose, is if your client or you both have unrealistic expectations around revisions. And this is where I suppose the topic really lies, because it's not designer versus client. It's really more about your design process and how this is coming about. So realistically, on a small project, the amount of revisions really shouldn't be that many, or if any at all. Because if your design process is straightforward and clear and deals with all of the things that should be dealt with on a project, such as giving the client a chance to actually create an active brief that is well complete, I suppose, because unless you've given your client the chance to request all of the things that they actually want and for you to actually listen to all of those things, they're going to kind of change their mind down the line. And I found this a lot when I was working for practice. So when I worked with architects and interior designers in other businesses, I found this really frustrating because there were a lot more revisions when I worked for other people. And I found that because their design process at the brief stage of a process was very minimal. They would walk in once, give a client an opportunity once to say what it was that they wanted. The architect or designer would walk away, create the brief, and then that was the agreement. That really isn't the right way to get a full client brief on a project. There's a lot more that needs to happen for you to get a full understanding of what a client wants. And unless you give the client that opportunity right at the beginning of the project, there will be lots of revisions and there will be lots of requests for changes because they might not have had a chance to really listen to what it was that you've not had a chance to listen to what it was that they really, really wanted from you. So on larger projects, let's finish with small projects. Small projects, they are usually not that complex. You've got the brief, you've got potentially a few phases of a full scope project to undertake, and probably the one area where there are some areas for opportunity of revisions is when you're doing sourcing or a detailed design, because that is where you're really refining some part of the process. Also potentially at tender stage or bidding stage, where you're about to do kickoff on a project and you've got something changes, like a builder comes in and decides that they can do something or do something in a better way. They might be improving the project or something. So that is a type of revision that you might have expected anyway, if you understand the design process anyway. So that is more along the lines of a full service project, which I suppose aren't that they're kind of in the middle, because a really simple project would be an e-design. You would never really allow for too many revisions, if any at all, on an e-design, because it's a very straightforward process of concept delivery, rather than full service or a more complicated project where you take it from start to finish. There are phases of the project that would require refinement and might require revisions as things change. So that is why these things happen, because of the process that we undertake as designers. But you need to make allowances for the process of some changes, because they are inevitable, especially on a larger project or like a more complex project. Not so much on a small project where you would literally just put some boundaries in place and say, this is what you're getting, this is what it includes, and that's it. But that would be for a really simple project, for example, like an e-design. Whereas a full service design project, you would have these phases where you would stop and say, well, is this what you want? Do we need any changes here? Is something, and this is, I mean, it's only fair to the client to give them that opportunity to speak up. And if you're not the designer that allows that, that's on you, because that is something we should be offering as designers. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this session, that the process I was taught by working in practice and was to give the client one opportunity to, at the beginning of the project, tell me what the brief was, and then I would go away and start designing. And the first few projects that I ran like that. And then I realized that wasn't really the right way to get the real scope of a project. What really helped me was undertaking a coaching certification, which helped me understand people on a deeper level, and then also helped me understand how to, well, it gave me so many other skills, like one skill, which is active listening, which is what I teach my mentees. I actually teach them some coaching skills in order to help them understand clients and help them ask the right questions in order to get the right information out of them. Stuff that we don't learn as designers, which is madness, because it is such a personal service that we provide. So you do need to go that extra step to get the information that you need in order to get the right information right at the outset of a project. And you might have heard me saying before, like I teach like a 3-step process to my mentees to say that means that they really can limit the amount of revisions on a project, because they, at the beginning, give the client multiple ways of expressing what it is that they're asking for. So that is part of my system that I teach, and it's a real fail-proof system. That means that you can't get it wrong, which is really, really great. And it's foolproof, and it's something which I'm surprised that we don't get taught at design school, because the brief is the whole point of a project. But getting a good brief is not really taught that well, but really essential. So I think the big problem with revisions and the kind of idea around revisions is that a lot of designers think that a revision, or when a client asks for a revision or a change, that this is a criticism. And most of the time it isn't. And the feeling that a designer kind of gets insulted when somebody asks for a change, I mean, I can understand, but at the same time, it's our job. So, being criticized, well, I mean, it isn't a criticism, it's just part of the process. But if you see it as a criticism, I mean, design is a very public thing, and it always has been. So we're designing for somebody else, and it's an opinion. And how you sell your opinion and how you sell your design to the client is really down to your skills as a designer and as a salesperson. Because what we do a lot of the time is sell that design to the client. And if they're not buying it, for example, then we haven't done our job to successfully communicate why it's important or why something has to be a particular way. Also, the biggest problem here is that interior designers and architects, we get stuck on an idea. And if we get stuck on an idea and think, you cannot change this, this is what you want, I know it's what you want, and we want it more than them. And we can get so upset if that one thing changes. And it seems to everything else falls apart if that happens. And this, I mean, it's not fun when that happens, because I've done it myself more than once. And, the one thing that you've been holding on to in that design that is going to be the best thing is the one thing that they're just like, yeah. And so again, it's down to us. Have you communicated how important that one thing is on the design and why it's been the kind of essence of what is holding that design scheme together? And if you haven't communicated that, then again, that's on you. You need to get better at selling your design to the client. And also, not everyone has been to design school, but this is something that we do learn at design school, is not to get hung up on the idea. Yes, if you have a good idea, run with it, but it's got to be a flexible enough idea to take some changes. I was going to say take some battering because that's how it feels sometimes. All right, so how do we deal with revisions? Well, first of all, we need to know what it says in our contract. That is number one, because unless it says how you deal with the revisions in the contract, then it's open and it's your word versus theirs. So make sure that whatever your rules are around revisions are obviously included in your contract. And then obviously communicate that. So, and stand by it, because if you're not sticking by your contract and not communicating when a client is asking for a revision or a change control procedure, and you're not adhering to your own procedures, then that is again something that you need to do. You need to take control of that and say, this is this is no longer a part of the what we agreed. So now this is more revisions than we've agreed. Do you want to proceed with more revisions? This is how much it'll cost, or this is what it's going to happen, or it's up to them whether they want to change it or not, or they deal with it with the builder on site. That could be another option. So you need to make sure that the client knows at the outset what is included in their contract. And that is important, because that is it's not only our responsibility, but it helps you to remind them right at the outset, saying that we're not just going to keep on designing forever. But I suppose that is, again, something we need to clarify, because a lot of, interior design is this personal process. It is a collaborative approach. And if you've sold that in your sales process as a designer, saying, well, I do collaborative design, we design together, well, you've kind of put that into the process yourself. So watch your words, because if that is something that you've communicated to the client, there may be something around that the client says, well, I thought this was a collaborative approach and we were going to keep designing together, and that's what this includes, revisions. Yay. No. So what happens, you need to know what happens when the revisions run out, and you need to communicate that to your client. And obviously have rules around it, and then stick to those rules. So this is a topic that comes up over and over and over again. So if you want a professional interior design community that you can rely on, have a look at our mentorship options, and let me know, how do you deal with revisions in your interior design business?